I just had an idea. Hello, welcome to the Wild Review, Wild Reviewer, and welcome back to this platform. Welcome back to the show, kids. I hope everybody had a great summer vacation without me. So welcome to Season 6 of the Wild Review. This season we're going to do something a little different. Definitely different from how things were run last season and the previous seasons. If you take a look back at everything that I've done prior to this, you'll know that I'm just one of those guys that will just find something to talk about, and I'll give my opinion on what I thought of it after talking about it. Usually it'll be a current show on network that I watch. It'll be like a movie that I discover and I just want to talk about it. I know for a fact, especially at the end of last season, I touched upon a lot of current things that were in theaters. I touched upon a lot of current things that were current and relevant at the time, but this season we're going to do something completely different, something I haven't really done before. This season is actually all planned this time on what I'm going to touch upon. In fact, this season has its own specific theme and little segment that I would like to call Lost and Found. Here is why. I've seen a lot of different shows, and what I've come to notice the last couple of months is usually when people think of a certain network that they watched as a child. In this case, we'll just say Nickelodeon. If I told you to think of a Nickelodeon show, what is one of the shows that would probably come to your mind? Majority of the time, in Nickelodeon's case, one of the things that would always come to mind is Drake and Josh, or iCarly, or the good seasons of SpongeBob, Fairly Odd Parents before everything went crazy. Some of the classic iconic shows that were on the networks in the early 2000s before 2010, before everything went really bad. The same thing can be said for the Disney Channel, seeing that many people like the old stuff than the new stuff. And the same can go for Cartoon Network, except Cartoon Network has kind of redeemed themselves in the last couple of years with the hit shows that they've produced, such as Adventure Time and Steven Universe and Regular Show and all the new stuff that isn't that bad. One of the biggest ones is Infinity Train, which is a show I'm definitely excited for and planning on seeing when it comes out next year. But you kind of see where I'm going. Majority of the time, when you think of a certain network, you will tend to think of the popular shows that made the network what they are. But what about the shows that didn't make it? Usually, when you think of a show that is not very popular and doesn't automatically click to your mind when you think of a network such as Nickelodeon or Disney Channel, you automatically come to the conclusion that it just wasn't a good show. That's not exactly the case. There are a lot of really good shows out there that just aren't memorable in any way and can be forgotten very easily. The shows don't have to be badly put together to be forgotten. There are a bunch of different shows out there that were actually really good, but you never hear about them because they've kind of just disappeared in the distance. Think of it like a school, the way a school is set up with all the different cliques. You have the popular kids, the ones that are well known, and then you got the loser kids. And then right in the middle is this group of kids that are kind of the underdogs. They're the ones that you kind of forget about. There's nothing really special about them, nor are they very memorable, but when you take a closer look into who they actually were, you'll realize there was more to this than anybody really saw. I thought it would be interesting for a whole season to take a look at a bunch of different shows that both succeeded and didn't succeed at its time when being aired that have kind of just been forgotten by a lot of people. And if the show that I'm talking about ends up in Lost and Found and you remember the show, that doesn't necessarily mean that it was actually forgotten. It's just that it's one of those shows that nobody really talks about much. For the remainder of the season, I'm going to take a look at 10 shows that I personally think were either underrated or just need a better look into why exactly they didn't work and why they're not very well known and would come up in a certain conversation when you talk about popular shows that were on at the time we were all kids. With all that said, let's get into the first show. You automatically know what it is because you most likely have seen the title, and you can definitely argue with me now on why it didn't work. But I know why it didn't work. 'Cause it's Planet Sheen! Yeah, just by talking about this show, I guess you can argue right off the bat, I'm kind of contradicting myself, because you can easily argue with me and say, hey, this show was pretty recent and I didn't forget about it because, Jesus Christ, it was horrible and I can't get it out of my mind. Yeah, this show was pretty recent. It premiered in October of 2010 and definitely had a lengthy run on Nickelodeon, even though it only lasted for one season. The only reason I'm talking about it is because it is a very interesting show to talk about, and also, I found the premise to be interesting, not much terrible. There are definitely terrible things about the show, but the overall premise of the show is an interesting one. Before we dwell into exactly what Planet Sheen was, though, let's just go all the way back to when times were simpler and better than what they are now. Planet Sheen is a spin-off from one of Nickelodeon's earliest iconic Nicktoons called The Adventures of Jimmy Neutron, Boy Genius. Sheen Estevez, who is the main character in Planet Sheen, is actually one of the sidekick and best friends of the main character in this show, Jimmy Neutron. Before being a show, though, Jimmy Neutron was actually a Nickelodeon animated film. In fact, it was one of their first CGI animated films. It was definitely interesting, but it was also a really big hit. So much of a hit that they gave Jimmy Neutron his own animated show where every episode focused on a different wacky adventure that him and his friends went on. Jimmy Neutron, like the title says, is a boy genius. He is extremely smart and ends up getting himself and all of his friends into wacky situations where they have to end up saving the town and battling off against villains. In the show, Jimmy and his group of friends all had their own little unique personality. Jimmy, of course, was the leader of his little friend group and was very intelligent and knew how to get out of certain situations. His friend Carl was a mama's boy. He was very wimpy and scared about everything and was a complete worrywart, didn't know what was going to happen next. And then you had Sheen, who is the main focus of what we're going to be talking about today. To give you an insight on how Sheen was in Jimmy Neutron, he was considered to be the comic relief. He was very weird, funny, not a very intelligent person compared to Jimmy Neutron, but he was definitely one of the funniest characters on the show. As a matter of fact, majority of the iconic lines came from this character. The idea of making a spin-off from Jimmy Neutron isn't actually a bad idea, especially since this focused on space travel and a different planet. It made perfect sense with the show because we've already established in Jimmy Neutron that there are other planets and aliens that exist in their universe. I mean, if the movie wasn't the biggest example that aliens exist, I don't know what to tell you. The problem came from who the spin-off was centered around. If they did a spin-off where Jimmy was the one stuck on the planet, I could definitely see it probably succeeding, but at the same time probably being a quick series because Jimmy's very intelligent. And unless something extreme that escalated happened, I could definitely see this series with Jimmy stuck on a planet working. I could also see the spin-off working with Carl, oddly enough. I know a lot of you may disagree with me, but it would definitely be an interesting show to watch with Carl getting stuck on a planet miles away from his home, and every episode we see his personality slowly changing and him going through a character development. Where when we first start off with him, he's the wimpy character that he was on Jimmy Neutron. But by the end, he's basically transformed himself into a mighty warrior who's now confident. Never in my life did I think they would actually give Sheen his own spin-off series, and holy crap. So Planet Sheen focuses on Sheen Estevez one day sneaking into Jimmy's lab, getting into a rocket that Jimmy specifically leaves notes around for him saying, don't do this and don't do that. Of course, he doesn't follow any of those rules, and he ends up blasting himself into outer space, eventually landing on a planet far away from Earth, millions of light years away from Earth, on a planet called Xenu, which is a place full of nothing but slimy, weirded, formed creatures. And this thing. The show was, interesting, to say the least. I mean, the pilot was, the pilot was pretty good. I watched majority of all the episodes of the show, except the later ones, because they started airing on Nicktoons, and, the pilot was alright, the second episode was alright, and that's all I gotta say about it. Again, the whole idea of a Jimmy Neutron character being on a different planet works, because again, you've established that aliens exist in this universe. I think the problem lied with, well, actually, here's the list of problems that lied within Planet Sheen. Problem 1, Sheen! Yeah, a bit ironic that one of the main problems of Planet Sheen was its main character. Now, like I said before, in Jimmy Neutron, Sheen was the comic relief of the show. He was very weird, he had random outbursts. But in Planet Sheen, they kind of increased all of that to the point where it makes you want to go up to him and slap him around the face and actually knock some sense into him. So one thing that you need to remember when you give a side character of a show, specifically a side character who's also the comic relief, his own show, is you need to make sure nothing really changes with that character. Of course, you're going to have to increase a few things of his personality and maybe alter a few things to make things work, but you gotta make sure that the character you're giving a show to doesn't aggravate the audience with its stupidity. Sheen was not a very intelligent character in Jimmy Neutron, and he definitely is not an intelligent character in his own show. In fact, his stupidity is so obnoxious, it would literally make you want to run up to the television screen and punch him in the face. And then make you go to the hospital, because now you got glass on your arm, right? Do TVs have glass? Is this glass? I don't know what this is. In the pilot, when Sheen crash lands on Earth, everybody's obviously fascinated about Sheen because he's an outsider. But because nobody outside of Xenu knows Sheen and knows what Earth is, they automatically just think that he's this intelligent person, even though everything that he's saying is wrong and inaccurate. Now, I get that's supposed to be the humor of the show, but sometimes it gets completely out of control and is very obnoxious to the point where it's annoying. And annoying is definitely the word. They've also increased his annoyance. Is that a word? Annoyance? I'm pretty sure it is. I don't think there was ever one point in Planet Sheen where he actually took something seriously. Number 2, dull characters. So Sheen isn't the only character in the show, obviously. There are other characters. There's a good, 7 main characters, I think, within the show. That's another thing about Planet Sheen when you think about it. The only character that stands out when you think of Planet Sheen is Sheen. I don't think you think about any other character, which is a humongous problem when having a show come to your mind. Jimmy Neutron had a bunch of memorable characters, to the point where if I were to show you this picture of a character in Jimmy Neutron, you would automatically know who this character is. You may not know his name on the top of your head, but just by watching Jimmy Neutron, you knew who this character was, you knew what he was like, the tone that he had towards everybody, and you knew he was a pretty funny character at times. With Planet Sheen, if I showed you this character, I'm pretty sure you wouldn't know who the hell it is. You probably don't know his name, you probably don't know what he's like or how he treats people. Hell, I doubt you even know if this character is even on Planet Sheen. The answer is yes, he is. So for other characters on Planet Sheen, we have Nesmith, who is a talking monkey that also crash landed on Xenu, and he's basically helping Sheen rebuild his ship so they can both travel back to Earth. You have Doppy, who's an identical alien clone of Carl. I get they were trying to rebuild the Jimmy Neutron team in this show. Nesmith obviously takes the role that Jimmy had, as he was very intelligent. Of course, they're doing a role reversal because they're all following in Sheen, but the fact that they just copied Carl's personality, in fact, they copied everything about Carl other than the fact that he doesn't have legs, that kind of seems a bit odd. I mean, honestly, every time I watch this show, I never really considered this character to be his own character. I just always considered him to be Alien Carl. In fact, sometimes I would even reference him to Alien Carl. Then you have this one character, Asifa. She's this blue warrior character. I forgot if she lived on the planet or if she was trapped on the planet. I don't remember exactly this character. This kind of proves that I don't know this character. This character is very dull, but I do know that she was Sheen's love interest in Planet Sheen. She is very tough, and that's really all I know about her. And then you had the Emperor of Xenu. The Emperor, he didn't have a name, he was just called the Emperor. He also had a daughter named Not Ooh, And she was definitely a character because she had two faces. She kind of had two different personalities, and she had a humongous crush on Sheen. And then you had the so-called antagonist of the show, Dorcas, who was this weird, skinny, tall, evil person that always tried to destroy Sheen because Sheen crash-landed on his house. That's literally the only reason why this character is after Sheen. Dorcas also had a little apprentice flying orange one-eyed bat thing called Pinter. I don't know what he's supposed to be. I also don't know if he's a pet to Dorcas or a friend. I really don't know. With that character mentioned, that leads me to the third main problem with Planet Sheen. Number 3! It's not Jimmy Neutron at all! With being a spin-off from Jimmy Neutron, you would think maybe it has some similar elements to Jimmy Neutron. Maybe it's taking more on the adventure space story, or maybe it's going to take an action role side. Or maybe because we're focusing on Sheen, we're going to have him go through an amazing space adventure where he's going to have to be this hero who saves a planet or something. Maybe he's going to have to save Xenu. No, that's not the case at all. The show just focuses on Sheen living on this planet. That's cool. In fact, come to think of it, he really doesn't reference Jimmy Neutron at all. I think the pilot, the second episode, and there's one episode that focuses on Ultralord. There are 3 episodes within this whole entire series that actually reference stuff that happened in Jimmy Neutron. There's no mentioning of Jimmy Neutron on this planet. There's no mentioning of any of his other friends on this show. There's no mentioning of any of the adults. Like, you'd think maybe he would throw in a Miss Fowl joke or something, but there's nothing! One thing that made Jimmy Neutron stand out was all of its main antagonists that it had. Now, Jimmy Neutron had a bunch of different villains that would pop up from here to there. I guess the most memorable one would be Professor Calamitous, but I do know there were a bunch of different villains and enemies that Jimmy Neutron faced against in a bunch of his different episodes. In fact, some of the episodes were actually 30-minute specials because it had a story-driven plot happening. Not much story-driven plot like Steven Universe had. Like, it didn't have a story arc at all. But they definitely had some intense stories that they told within this show. With Planet Sheen, they didn't have any of that. The only half-hour special that I'm aware that this show had was its pilot. I don't think it had any other half-hour special after that. There was no hour-long special. There weren't even any returning antagonists. Again, the main antagonist supposedly in this show is Dorcas. And half the time he's considered a subplot in every episode. Because he always tries to find a way to destroy Sheen and get him off the planet or make everybody hate him. I guess you can compare him to being like Robbie Rodden. How every episode of Lazy Town he would constantly try to get rid of Sportacus. Well, this is the exact same thing. I made a Lazy Town reference 2 years late from the Robbie Rodden meme. That's great. That's something I definitely think that was lacking within Planet Sheen itself. It was definitely missing that aspect to tell really great stories. Not stories that focused on Sheen just goofing off on this planet. I mean, don't get me wrong, Sheen did definitely face off against some monsters, like there was a quesadilla monster that happened for some reason. There was an episode that focused on him meeting this beast. I think that was the second episode where he met Dobby. But yeah, there really wasn't a main villain within this show. I mean, I don't even know if we should consider Dorcas a main villain, because the whole point of why he wants to destroy Sheen is kind of stupid. I mean, I get he's finding Sheen to be very annoying, and we could actually agree on his side, but majority of his plans were really dull and stupid. Not to mention, they were also kind of dark, and while I don't have a problem with dark humor in children's shows, you know, I do think maybe things were being taken a little far, but then again, this is an alien that we're talking about, so I guess it works. Like I said in the beginning, and as you can imagine, Planet Sheen did not last very long. The show only ran for one season, a total of 26 episodes, 26 individual episodes. I'm not exactly sure if the 30-minute pilot counts along with those 26 episodes. I'm sure it would. But the show didn't last very long. It ran from October 2010 to 2013. I don't remember what month in 2013, that's when it was canceled. A lot of people did not like this show, and they were very quick to get it off the air. Of course, it took about 3 years after it premiered to get it off the air, so yeah, good job, Nickelodeon. I want to know whose idea it was to give Sheen his own spin-off. Like, who exactly thought this was a good idea? It's actually a really big shame because although the idea of Sheen being trapped on a planet isn't exactly a bad one, I think the way that it went out was a completely bad idea. Like, the whole premise of what the show was and what was included in every episode, I definitely think they missed out on something really great. Again, the show could have just simply been Sheen crashing on a planet, and now he's responsible for fixing these problems and actually saving the planet. And yeah, he could be stupid and his same Sheen self that he was in Jimmy Neutron, but at least it would be a little interesting, like Jimmy Neutron would be. I always imagined what the ending of the show would be like the series finale of the show, and I was really hoping they would do this. Of course, the show is canceled now, so that's never going to happen. But I always thought it would be really interesting if, for the last episode of Planet Sheen, we had Jimmy Neutron along with Goddard and Carl and Cindy and Libby. Like, they all traveled to Xenu because they tracked down where Sheen went, and they go to confront him and bring him home, and everyone on Xenu found out, oh, you were lying to us, because they would eventually learn that everything Sheen said wasn't accurate to what was really going on, and that everything about him was a lie. And everyone on Xenu would kind of like avoid him and give him the silent treatment. And then something major can happen, like we could have this like really villainous person kind of enter in on the show and kidnap people that Sheen has made friends with, and now Sheen has to go after them and save everyone, and at the end of the episode, he would be rewarded, and it's like, okay, we forgive you, but then he goes back home to Earth. Not harsh, but, you know, it's because, oh, he's got to go home. Like, I always thought that would be really interesting, mostly for Jimmy Neutron to make an appearance in Planet Sheen. But that's never going to happen, because Planet Sheen is gone. I guess that's good. Now, there's a specific reason why I added this to Lost and Found, and that's mostly because Planet Sheen is one of these Nickelodeon shows, one of these many Nickelodeon shows that people just try to avoid and purposely try to forget about. So, of course, in a few years from now, Planet Sheen is going to be just one of those shows that Nickelodeon put out that just didn't work out very well and is now vanished within the vault of Nickelodeon Nicktoons that were a mistake, right next to Fanboy and Chum Chum and Pig, Goat, Banana, Cricket. Yes. It's also very interesting to note that when people bring up the topic of Jimmy Neutron, at least one person will bring up, hey, you know, they did a spin-off about Sheen going on a planet, and usually the response to that is either, oh my god, that sounds absolutely horrible, or, yeah, I've seen that, it's a piece of crap. And that is Planet Sheen. You can definitely see why it didn't work out and why it's considered to be a lost part of Nickelodeon's history of animated shows. That's... Okay, that was weird. Oh, I see what that was. And that's all I got on the topic of Planet Sheen. Now I want to hear what you all think. Have you ever seen Planet Sheen? What is your opinion on it? If you've seen it, do you prefer Jimmy Neutron over Planet Sheen? I'm pretty sure the answer to that is yes. Also, if you had the ability to change something in Planet Sheen, what exactly would you change about it to make it an actual, proper, badass Jimmy Neutron spinoff? Do you agree or disagree with anything that I said in this video? Tell me what you think, all in the comments below. Thank you for watching The Wild Review. I'm The Wild Reviewer, and you just saw me review a thing. Wow, that was really cool! I hope you enjoyed today's episode of The Wild Review. Make sure if you like what you see, you give it a like or something. Do whatever you want. I really don't care. Make sure you come back next week because Lost and Found is just getting started. Next week, we're going to talk about a different kind of media that you're most likely going to remember, as well as Planet Sheen. This time, it's on the Disney side.
Wild like wildlife.